that what you were just talking about leads me into my kind of final question with James Harden, because he's been in the news a lot recently about, trade rumors, not, following or agreeing with the Rockets like protocols or whatever. So my question to you is, and Dan, feel absolutely free to join in on this as well. What do you personally believe, is James Harden's future with the Houston Rockets?
I think he's probably not, excuse me, sorry. He's probably not going to be there just because I know how the NBA works. I don't know when that's going to be, but and I shouldn't say, it's not like some big secret. Like I know how the NBA, we all know how the NBA works. Like if somebody doesn't want to be, we want to be in an organization, they're not going to be there. We saw that with Anthony Davis. We've seen that with a lot of players. The players are empowered. They know basically that one player on an NBA roster can make the difference between the championship or not, or a playoff team or not, especially when you're a superstar. So they flex that power. And they also know that one unhappy player in a locker room, it's a little bit different than football. One unhappy player in a locker room, it's supposed to be a tight-knit group of like, say, 12 to 15 guys or whatever. That could really torpedo a team and an organization. So I think that eventually, you have a young coach there. You have you have a new front office regime. I think they're probably smartly waiting around they're not going to trade him for nothing, but I think eventually he's going to make enough noise and they're not going to win enough games. Right. Or they're at least not going to win a championship where he's going to have to move on at some point. Now, but I will say, I was watching Inside the NBA a few weeks ago, and Kenny Smith made a good point. He said, and this is not necessarily an anti-player empowerment thing. Like if they have the ability to leverage their situation, then I guess, more power to them. But if you're the team, from the team's perspective, the minute that you hear that Harden's unhappy, I'm not sure why some of these teams snap trade these guys when, and Kenny Smith's point was, and I hope I'm sort of paraphrasing it right, it's sort of like, well, that's all well and good. We'll try to trade you, but if the right trade doesn't come up, you know what I mean? Then you're just going to have to play for us, So like, I think that that's not really what happened with Anthony Davis in New Orleans. Like sometimes these players, it's fine to be empowered, but sometimes the players hold the teams hostage a little bit. And I'm just talking strictly from the team's perspective. You have to
come on, Anthony,
about your own well-being at some point, and not be so scared of like what would happen if you just said, "Hey, James Harden, we're not going to trade you."
Right.
Also, I mean, look how far we've come in the NBA. We went from, with David Stern, we had Chris Paul almost get traded to the Lakers, and it got vetoed, and a pretty similar situation now in Adam Silver's NBA, and you hear that there's some reluctance on the Davis trade, and it eventually goes through, and then now the Lakers win the championship with Davis and LeBron. It's sort of like, well, once we saw that trade was going to happen, that NBA shaking trade, it's like, oh well, having LeBron and Davis, having two all world players on starting five, yeah, there's a pretty good chance that they're going to win a championship, and they did. I think I don't want to put words in Anthony's mouth, but I think we probably both agree that James Harden going to a team won't make them a championship team in the next year or two. They could vie for a championship, but we've seen a lot of Harden in the NBA, and so far there's nothing to indicate that he's a winner rather than a scorer.
Yeah, I would pretty much agree with that. I would just ask you guys both real quickly, if he were to get traded, it's not saying he will, but just say he does get traded, does that team offer him the max?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think
okay.
You're talking about like if he gets traded, will they eventually give him like a contract extension that's like worth the max?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have, because I think what's going to happen is that he's a good enough player where, like, I think Davis was a, sort of an outline situation. He's a good enough player that when you actually trade for him, you're going to have to give up something, and something of consequence. So, unless you have like a Kawhi situation where you basically rent him and you win the title, and then you're like, I guess maybe he chose not to. It's not like Toronto didn't want to resign him for all we knew, from what we know. But maybe he's traded to a team, they win the title, then they say, okay, we got what we needed from him, and we're just going to move on. I doubt that that's the case. I just think that he's he's an MVP, a multiple time scoring champion. For that type of player, you're going to have to give something up, and if you're giving something up, I mean, it only makes sense to have him for more than like half of the season if you trade for him in February.
And yeah, and that's what we're looking at that right now with the potential offers. I mean, if he goes to if trade happens and he goes to Brooklyn, Brooklyn is going to have to give up, multiple picks to be able to afford him. And if he goes to 76ers, they probably have more to give back instead of picks. So I mean, either of those teams is positioned for dominance in the East. They're just like one or two pieces away. It would be. I mean, it's always fascinating when an all-star of that caliber wants out. But yeah, the next place that he's going to be is going to obviously do whatever they can to keep him for the long term.
Okay, so I can respect both those points. I think I would think about it a little bit more, but we're not gonna talk about that anymore.
Well, don't hold back, man. Keep going.
Okay. If you want me to say something, I'll say something. I obviously you guys don't know me that well, but I am not the biggest James Harden fan in terms of just an NBA fan, and I don't think he's deserved the max. I'm just gonna say it.